the question on everyone's mind is, will the lockdown be lifted in India? That is one thing, that will the lockdown be lifted? Another is, should the lockdown be lifted? Now, the important thing to remember is that there are certain assumptions on which the government decided to impose this lockdown, the 21-day lockdown. The announcement was made on March 24th, and there were expectations around that time that the cumulative infection number was around 900 million by June if there is no lockdown. And there was an assumption that a high fatality rate of 2% was assumed. So 900 million people multiplied by 2% fatality rate or mortality rate, whatever you would like to call it, would make that a case that 18 million Indians would die by June end if the lockdown was not put in place. Therefore, the government was under a very severe pressure to impose this lockdown. However, the total number of infected, really speaking, form into three different categories. One is infected but asymptomatic. The other is infected and symptomatic but unreported. And the third is infected and identified as infected. These are all different things that you need to understand. You need to model the curve accordingly. Now, the very interesting thing to know that is that in the case of India, the curve is much flatter than the United States and Europe. However, it is steeper than China and Singapore. Whether this fatality rate is correct to be applied to India, each country's conditions differ from the other. They depend on the average age, the life expectancy, other morbidity conditions. Also, it depends on the temperature. The more humid temperature in countries such as India has, as you know, created a certain expectation that a fatality rate will be much lower and that the virus will die much sooner than in other countries. Now, take China. As on April 7th, it says that 81,740 identified infections were there. Of course, China always is a question mark that, whether this number is also true. But assuming that in India there are 3 times as many, so there would be 246,000 identified infections. And with a fatality rate of, let us say, 5%, I'm taking 5% on the higher side, the absolute number of fatalities or mortalities would be something like hardly 12,500. And this is a very far cry from the 18 million assumptions that was made earlier. So the very basis on the basis of which the lockdown was imposed in India does not seem to be based on right assumptions. Having said that, I'm sure that Prime Minister Narendra Modi has his many other reasons, and so far this lockdown has been successful on the whole, but for some violations of social distancing, people have by and large respected the Prime Minister, rightly so. The Prime Minister is a leader of the nation, and whatever he says should be abided by. There is no second guessing, no second questions. But these were some statistics which I gave you, and the undercounting has led to certain differences as far as India is concerned. Now, what has the lockdown achieved so far? Comparison of India's epidemic growth curve with other countries. I told you that India's is much flatter today as compared to United States and Europe. However, it is much steeper. That curve that we're talking about is much steeper than China and Singapore. Now, for all you know, that the cases which are being reported over time now have increased over the last few days. Okay. Now, yet one can raise questions that, however, if you continue the lockdown, already Odisha and Punjab have announced extensions. Maharashtra, especially for Mumbai and Mumbai metropolitan region, are going to announce the extensions. There is a poor availability of daily supplies. There are economic costs attached to it. People not being able to go to work, people not being able to buy essential commodities. There is a rabi harvesting season that will get missed. The marginal workers, they are getting laid off. They are finding it difficult to even sustain, so they're going back to their villages. What will they find over there is going to be another question mark. And this is probably the peak of the harvesting season. If there are no people available, if there's a complete lockdown conditions, how are things going to reach the consumer? For example, there is a lot of fresh vegetables, fruits available, but they are finding it difficult to find the transportation vehicles to reach the consumer. So farmers are just throwing away the fruits and vegetables. Difficult scenario. Lockdown technically should continue, but for a short period of time. Sooner or later, the government will have to realize that they will have to lift the lockdown at least partially. And you can say that, oh, but we lift the lockdown and the contagion, the effect will start. It will start transmitting from one person to another. Now that we know that coronavirus is a contagious disease, yes, we know all that, but sooner or later you have to lift it. If not after another 21 days, say you may extend it by another 15 days or another 7 days thereafter, but sooner or later you have to take the risk. There are huge economic costs attached to continuing the lockdown. Will the country be able to afford such a big amount? Are we so wealthy enough that we can go and put so much money, print so much currency and put the money in the pockets of people? That will lead to rampant inflation, and that will impact the country completely. Not only the foreign exchange currency, look at the currency now, it's gone. The dollar is over 77 rupees to a dollar. So it's already fallen out of shape. The country will have great imbalance. Foreign exchange reserves will dwindle. There will be hyperinflation if the country starts printing more currency notes. Yes, there are costs. Human lives have to be saved to quite an extent. The medical facilities, we are getting time now. These 21 days has given a lot of time to the government to set up temporary facilities. And but we cannot build ventilators overnight. You cannot ask automobile companies like Maruti to make ventilators overnight. They are not in the business of making ventilators. So there are costs attached to it. Lot of preparation should have been done much before all this has onset. But now that it is in the swing and the Prime Minister is taking such good measures in Maharashtra, Uddhav Thackeray is doing such a good job. Now that all this is there, they should minimize the lockdown period and try to get out as early as possible. People, it's something like, keeping somebody on a ventilator for as long as is possible. Now, as long as you put somebody on a ventilator, he is going to keep breathing, but it's artificial breathing. You have to let somebody off the ventilator at some point of time, and sooner it is better than later. Please keep this into perspective before we figure out the necessity of the lockdown. Lockdown is necessary, but you cannot keep a human body on ventilator as long as it is being thought. You cannot have like 2 months or 3 months of complete lockdown. There is a parlance in medical terminology that 20% of the people who are on ventilator do not even come off. Once you wean them off, they are not able to breathe well. So do not forget that. Don't keep the economy on a ventilator as long, is my suggestion to the government. Happy investing. Take care. Bye-bye.